I mentioned in the NES Metroid video that Metroid Zero Mission was the first game in the series that I completed, but Metroid Fusion was actually the first game in the series that I played for myself. I played on the Wii U's Virtual Console in the late 2010s, but had never really gotten to a point where I could beat it. I blame motivation, honestly. But sometime after I finished Zero Mission, I gave Fusion another shot and ended up loving my time with it. And that would eventually lead me to trying out games like Super Metroid, Metroid Prime, and becoming a full fan of the series, all in time for the release of Metroid Dread in 2021. Fusion is one of those games that made me wish I was a little bit older around the time of its release, mostly because fans were really excited for this title, and that was mainly due to the time between entries.
The Metroid series was sort of on a hiatus between 1994 and 2002, and it wasn't because of poor sales or anything like that. Super Metroid ended up selling pretty solidly at 1.42 million units. According to Yoshio Sakamoto himself, he couldn't think of how to make a proper follow-up to Super Metroid on the N64. That sounds kind of familiar. There was a point in time where Nintendo approached an unnamed developer to make a new entry in the series for the N64, but they ultimately turned down the offer as they felt they didn't have the confidence to make a game that could favorably compare to Super Metroid, which was ultimately taken as a compliment by Sakamoto. So after that, the Metroid series just kind of paused, for lack of a better term. The closest thing to a new entry was Samus's appearance as a fighter in both Super Smash Bros. And Super Smash Bros. Melee. But in early 2001, Nintendo would reveal that a new entry in the series was being worked on for their newest handheld, the Game Boy Advance, then simply titled Metroid 4. Looking at some pre-release footage, it's kind of bizarre to see how radically different the game was at this point in development. Samus had this all-black suit, she's jumping between walls and the ceiling, the grapple beam was being used to throw enemies at each other. It's just so different from what we ended up with. But from what I can tell with this footage, the idea of Samus being injected with Metroid DNA must have been there from the start of development. When the game was being properly promoted closer to its release, I'm sure there were plenty of fans who were confused as to why they were promoting this blue character. There were plenty of screenshots showing Samus along with this blue warrior. So was this Samus or some sort of clone? Was it Armstrong from the tie-in comic? Well, fans would find out once Metroid Fusion released on November 18th, 2002 here in the United States. It was also released the same day as Retro Studios' Metroid Prime. It's kind of funny how we went from 8 years of nothing to 2 Metroid games dropping on the same day, and they both end up being some of the best games of the franchise, if I could jump the gun a bit here. With the Nintendo Power tie-in comic still on my mind, I did look to see if there was some sort of obscure supplementary material for Fusion, and I did find this manga called Samus and Joey, written by Itsuki Koji. It was a monthly manga released in 12 issues from May of 2004 to April of 2005 that features this kid named Joey going on an adventure with Samus through space. The only major talking point I've seen for this manga is this admittedly badass panel of Samus with a cloak over her armor. But I didn't really want to mention this too much just cause this was released after Fusion, though like the Super Metroid comic, I'd say there's no harm in giving this a read.
We're now at the 4th mainline entry of the series, so does this one try to follow its predecessors as closely, or does it go and try something different? Let's take a look at the story of Metroid Fusion.
Sometime after the destruction of planet Zebes, a Biologic Space Labs team heads a scouting mission on planet SR-388, and Samus finds herself as the team's bodyguard. During the mission, she encounters a horror node that transforms into a gelatinous creature that flies into Samus, to which Samus does nothing about and hops back onto her ship to follow BSL back to Galactic Federation HQ. But soon after, she loses consciousness, and her gunship crashes into a nearby asteroid belt. She's safe thanks to the ship's escape pod and is eventually taken back to GFHQ, where it's discovered that she's been infected by the X-Parasite, a creature native to SR-388 that to this day is still probably the scariest enemy in any Metroid game. We all know the first game was inspired by the first Alien movie, but it's heavily speculated that Fusion was inspired by the 1982 sci-fi horror The Thing, a movie that I'm admittedly too much of a pussy to sit down and watch. The parasite has the ability to work its way into a being's body, absorb its DNA and memories, and replicate it on a whim, sometimes leaving nothing but the victim's bones behind. They also have the ability to reproduce asexually and can replicate themselves like the Bibblies and Smiling Friends. I just wanted my... Because the X-Parasites had become so embedded into Samus's nervous system, they had to surgically remove large pieces of her suit to get anywhere near the infection. Samus was given a minimal chance of survival until someone brought up the idea of making a Metroid vaccine using a cell culture from the baby Metroid. The Metroids were actually the dominant predator of the X-Parasites, but that kind of isn't the case anymore since we, The vaccine was prepared and injected immediately, not only eradicating the X from Samus's body, but it also overrides Samus's DNA to make her part Metroid. Samus makes a full recovery, now rocking a much different suit. I dig the look of the Fusion suit, honestly. I would love to see an updated 3D model of it that's styled after the version of it from the intro in Dread. Almost immediately after she woke up, however, the Federation tasked Samus with traveling to the BSL station to investigate an explosion in the containment bay. As a condition for getting a new ship, she's given an AI companion to act as her CEO for this particular mission, who she eventually names after her original CEO, Adam Malkovich. Soon Samus discovers that the X-parasites have begun rapidly spreading across the station, taking on the forms of different creatures and seemingly being one step ahead at every turn. On top of all of that, she soon learns that the pieces of her power suit that were surgically removed were transported to the containment bay on the BSL station, and since the suit is organic to better interface with Samus, the remaining X inside use Samus's DNA to transform into the Samus Aran X, or the SAX for short. This is a Samus with no soul at full potential, rocking everything Samus had in Super Metroid. Hell, the damn thing goes on the loose after using a power bomb to escape the containment bay, and since Samus is now part Metroid, she's weak to colder temperatures, meaning any encounter with the SAX would essentially be suicide thanks to the SAX coming equipped with the Ice Beam. But spoiler warning, this thing can be so stupid at times I'm convinced it's not using the X-ray visor. Because of her surgery, Samus has lost all of her upgrades again and she'll need to get everything back, but since we're on a space station, we don't have Chozo statues to rely on anymore. Thanks to Samus's Metroid DNA, she can absorb any floating X-parasite to recover health and ammo, and absorbing certain core X-parasites will lead her to getting some of her familiar abilities back. Not only that, but the Federation will also send Samus some weapons via these data rooms, and I can only imagine the download speeds needed to get these over a fucking Wi-Fi connection or some shit. She's frail when she starts the game. This is probably the weakest that Samus has ever been in the history of the franchise. Especially before you get any sort of suit upgrades, Samus is very fragile. But much like previous games, she'll start getting stronger as she gets some of her power-ups back. Control overall is a bit different compared to Super Metroid. Samus is a bit heavier here, and there's only one button to use to aim your gun, which I think overall is a better way to do it. There's no item select like last time either. If you want to use missiles or power bombs, just press the R trigger and use to your heart's content. Sadly, a few parts of Samus's kit have been nerfed overall. The wall jump is damn near useless now, as Samus can't influence her direction in midair as easily. Bomb jumping is useless now as well, since the time between bomb explosions has been significantly increased, making it pretty much impossible. Because of these few changes, it's almost impossible to sequence break in Fusion. However, my enjoyment of Metroid games doesn't hinge purely on sequence breaking. That was always a bonus. Making up for all this though is the buff to Samus's charge beam. When firing a full charge blast, there's this little flash of light here that has a hitbox that does massive damage. If you get up close and personal with enemies, especially when you have the plasma beam, your foes will melt in front of you. Samus can also grab ledges now. It's nothing groundbreaking, but it is an addition I appreciate regardless. Pretty much everything from Super Metroid returns in this game, except for the grapple beam, X-ray scope, and the crystal flash.
And nothing of value was lost.
A few abilities have some slight changes compared to last time. The Spazer beam technically isn't here, but in its place we have the wide beam, which may as well be the Spazer in everything but name. The super missiles have been condensed into an upgrade for the regular missiles, which I think is overall better in the long run. However, there's just a tiny consequence because of it that I'll touch on later. While most of the items in this game return from previous adventures, she does have a few new additions. Because of her Metroid DNA, she can't use the Ice Beam initially, so the Federation will send her ice missiles that function pretty much the same way. As a consequence, some enemies can take a bit longer to kill, but I never found this to be too much of an issue. You can also grab the new diffusion missiles, pretty much giving the ice missiles a charge effect that can freeze enemies in place that the missiles can't reach. It's a cool item, but I didn't really use it outside of puzzle solving. The Super Metroid was definitely more on the non-linear side, but Fusion pulls a complete 180 and is very linear. Upon entering a new area, Adam will mark your general destination on your map depending on the sector. However, Adam doesn't tell you how to get to your destination. That is still up to you. So in a way, there's still that sense of exploration from the previous games. I don't mind the more linear setup, especially because it's in service of the story. Despite being on a space station, there are still plenty of unique environments to explore. The BSL station is split into 6 different sectors that simulate different environments, like Sector 1 being a complete recreation of SR-388's main ecosystem. There's an underwater facility, a desert-like region, a more jungly section, a cave system with some lava sections, and an ice-themed zone with these blue X-parasites. Without the Varia suit to absorb them, these little fuckers do a shit ton of damage. And when you stumble into a room with like 10 of them, you better pray that Samus won't be front and center of the newest item on an ice cream parlor's menu. This one tastes like trauma. There's even a containment area where you find all the animals from Super Metroid, and the bird one had a baby! I don't care if it saves time, killing the animals is wrong. Do the right thing, make Fusion canon. There's no shortage of unique areas to explore in Fusion, and even when you go back to a previous sector, there's always a new section to traverse rather than retreading the same parts over and over. You won't have access to everything at first, as there are a few security gates that block progression until Samus can find the access rooms, but you'll unlock those naturally as you go throughout the game. With less of a focus on non-linear exploration, the game is able to focus a bit more on refining the abilities Samus has to get to your next location. Shine sparking has been made so much easier. There's no 3-frame window for the horizontal shine spark anymore. Now you just jump, pick a direction, and zoom off to your heart's content. Beams once again stack in Fusion, but unlike Super Metroid, you can't turn specific beams on or off, which I don't really mind too much. You get the high jump and the jump ball at the same time, which I really appreciate, considering the fact that bombs take longer to explode now. There's a sense of trepidation as you're sleuthing around the BSL station. There are points where you'll be hiding from the SAX as it's on the hunt, and if you ever try to take it on, well...
No. Wait. Wait.
Yeah, that. The sense of thrill you get whenever you're on the run for the SAX was for the longest time unmatched, but that sense of thrill kind of goes out the window when the SAX ends up acting like this. You can fuck with the SAX a lot when you get the chance.
Huh?
It's not just the SAX that Samus will run into. There's plenty of diverse enemies and bosses to encounter. One of the things I love is that the bosses will actually use the abilities you can get after taking them out, though some of them can be kind of weird. We find Arachnus again, and I guess he's a little bit more entertaining than last time. Zazabi, the giant condom-looking thing, uses the high jump. Yakuza uses a space jump after its legs fall off. That's kind of unsettling. Some of the X-Parasites will even start destroying data rooms when they figure out that's how Samus is getting stronger, and one of them absorbs the Various suit and becomes this giant blob of gunk. Terra's shine sparks all over the place after you hit it, but it makes some weird fucking noises before it explodes. Notori can be a bit annoying because of these tiny projectiles the plants spit out, but once the statue starts shooting the plasma beam, it's no issue whatsoever. Nightmare is probably the coolest boss. At first you can't use missiles because of its gravity generator, but once that's taken out, his mask will fall off and you can take it out that way. Ridley's fight is still kind of easy, especially compared to his encounter in Super Metroid, but good lord, why is he screaming like that? Who's trying to jam something up his ass? And why are they keeping his carcass in the last freezer? The more you go through the game, the more you begin to realize that something isn't quite right with this place. For whatever reason, there's a sub-area in Sector 1 that looks suspiciously like Torian from planet Zebes, and at one point the Federation stops sending support data for Samus. Something isn't right here, and sure enough, after some poking around, Samus comes across a restricted area that leads her to discovering a hidden Metroid breeding program. Yep, the Federation is breeding their own Metroids. At first I was thinking this was just a continuation of the research being done on Sarah Station back in Super Metroid. You know, if the Metroids truly could be used for the betterment of the galaxy, then why not try to do all that again? Adam tries to defend it, saying that it's purely for researching the Metroid's life cycle, but considering the fact that Sector 1 was created to grow the Metroids at a rapid rate to an Omega Metroid, and that they've grown Alpha, Gamma, and Zeta Metroids, it's hard not to think that they're breeding them for warfare. The Federation has also taken interest in the X-Parasites and want to capture the SAX for study, which Samus rightfully states is a dumb fucking idea because, hey, not 20 minutes ago, I shot a parasite who mimicked a human and tried to blow the whole damn station up. That's why the Federation stopped sending new weapon data to Samus, as they didn't want her to become too strong and defeat one of the SAX. And I say one of, because Adam reveals that since the X-Parasites reproduce asexually, there are no more than 10 SAX on the station. That is a whole lot of nope. I should mention there's actually a bit of a mistranslation at this part of the game. The Galactic Federation as a whole isn't doing this Metroid breeding program, but rather it's a rogue faction of the Federation acting in secret. That certainly makes the intro to Dread make a bit more sense. Rogue faction or not, the Federation is on their way as Samus pleads with the AI to do the right thing, accidentally calling it Adam after it locks her in a navigation room. At first the AI mocks Samus when she says that the real Adam made a sacrifice to save the world once, but then suddenly Adam tells Samus to alter the ship's orbit to crash into SR-388, even changing its speech patterns into the original Adam, finishing the last mission briefing with this iconic, "Any objections, lady?" That's kind of sexist. Samus does reveal later that the minds of Federation scientists and leaders were uploaded to GF computers, so I guess this AI awakened and became a true digital Adam Malkovich? Makes no sense, but it's kinda cool, I guess. Samus heads to the operations room, but not before encountering one of the SAX and absolutely curb stomping the fucking thing. It flies away before being absorbed though, but right now there's no time to think about that. Samus redirects the station to drift into SR-388's atmosphere and hauls ass back to her ship. When she gets to the dock though, her ship is nowhere to be found, and all she's left with is a giant-ass Omega Metroid. All seems lost at first until the SAX floats in to take the Metroid on, getting properly bitch-slapped for his stupidity. Being a woman of opportunity, Samus absorbs the SAX, gets the orange color of her power suit back, and even gets the Ice Beam to take on the Omega Metroid. With the creature disposed, Samus is able to escape in her ship as the station crashes into the planet below, destroying it and SR-388 with it. As the explosion dissipates behind them, Samus ponders how the Federation will react to the actions they took to save the world, with Adam comforting Samus, telling her at least one of them will understand. The game ends with a shot of all the cute little critters we saved, who somehow flew Samus' ship out of the way of the Omega Metroid. That's actually impressive, I'm not gonna lie. This game is great, truly. It's not without its issues, unfortunately. I do enjoy the linear structure, but because of it, getting all the items for 100% suffers heavily because of it. I hate getting 100% in Fusion. If you go to a navigation room after beating Ridley, you're locked into the endgame, meaning you can't backtrack to previous sectors to grab items you may have missed until you reload your save file. There are hallways that will take you between sectors so you can get to previous areas without going to a navigation room, but the whole process was just really tedious. Remember how I said that the devs condensing super missiles into the regular missiles had a small consequence? Well, by the time you get to the end of the game, you're only really collecting maybe 1 or 2 missile upgrades and a fuck ton of power bomb expansions. Seriously, why do I need 74 fucking power bombs? There's also a few annoying puzzles involving the Shine Spark in order to get specific items. Not all of them are bad though, I do want to stress. Graphically, I love how Fusion looks. The sprite detail is incredible for this point of the handheld's lifecycle. Animation is smooth. Nothing looks out of place in Fusion aside from the base color of the Varia suit. It's like putting dog shit and vomit into a blender. Something you may have noticed if you're used to playing Metroid Fusion on a big screen is that the colors look a bit different compared to something like the Wii U Virtual Console release. If you grew up with an original GBA wide model, you'd know that the screen on it wasn't very good. Not only was it not backlit, but it couldn't handle the 15-bit color gamut, or the range of colors that the GBA could produce. Developers had to compensate for this by exaggerating the color palettes, but on modern displays, the games ended up looking washed out or extremely vibrant. Metroid Fusion was a victim of this process, but for the NSO release of Fusion, Nintendo did slightly mute the color palettes to try and make the games look more like how they did on original hardware. Previous attempts at fixing it ended up making things worse, like on the Game Boy player for the GameCube, Nintendo used softening filters, bad scaling, and an incorrect color gamut that led to input lag.
Did you get that?
No!
I love how Fusion looks with these more muted colors on NSO. Things just look a bit more natural this way. Musically speaking, Fusion is one of my favorite soundtracks. It has a great blend of pieces for tense moments, scary situations, and even tracks that'll get me dancing a bit when I'm shooting an electric eel monster between the fucking eyes. Sector 1's theme and the second boss theme are probably my favorite tracks, though I still really like Nightmare's boss theme and Ridley's boss theme, even if it's hard to hear over Ridley getting his balls caught in a mousetrap. Metroid Fusion may not have been the game everyone was expecting after Super Metroid, but it's one that I hold close to my heart. Samus is fun to control, the story is good stuff, the soundtrack is great, items are fun. It's a kick-ass game overall. While I may not enjoy going for 100%, that isn't going to deter me from giving this a seal of approval. Some players may not be down for a more linear adventure, but despite its structure, I think this is a great Metroid game to start the series with. It's hard to get lost in Fusion. While the damage output can be a bit jarring at times, I think this is a game anyone can pick up and play. So if you're looking to get into the series for yourself, Fusion is a pretty good place to start your adventure.
With Fusion now done, we're over the hump of this marathon. We still got about 3 games left to go, but before we jump back to the console titles, the Game Boy Advance has one more mainline Metroid game to look at. So the next time we meet, I'll be taking a look at Metroid Zero Mission for the Game Boy Advance. Until then, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all again soon.